Hello and welcome to another Blender tutorial. In this video we will take a closer look at reflections in cycles and create an awesome reflection catcher. So a couple weeks back I posted a video where I showed how you can remove reflections on certain objects or surfaces but keep them on other surfaces, which is very nice for product visualization. Now this video is a continuation of that because I have since then been playing more with reflections and a better reflection catcher, and I thought maybe you are also interested in this kind of stuff. So let's get started! Okay, here I am in Blender 2.8. This is still beta at the time of this recording. And I'm just going to put together a very simple scene because all we really care about in this tutorial is the reflections. So I take a ground plane, put in a sphere, turn this into an area light and make it a disk. Just shine it onto our object sort of from behind. Now we look through the camera and we're gonna have the reflection down here. So let me go switch over to cycles, GPU, only render the region and go to rendered view. Right, this is what we get. Also, I'm going to add an environment light, something from HDRI Haven, because we want nice looking reflections. Maybe this thing. Okay, now maybe move the camera up a little. So we do have some transparent areas in our image, or maybe go down and rotate up. Like this, and also scale up this sphere like so. Now we're going to go over to shading, also go into camera view here, and this is a little big here. Let's do something like this. Now we want the ground plane to have a new material, make it metallic, turn down the roughness so that we get the reflection down here. That's what we care about. Take the this sphere, shade smooth, also give it a material and make it blue, maybe also metallic and less roughness. So we get nice reflections here from our environment texture. And over here in the reflection we can see, and also here, our area light here. Maybe I want to move that to here. Okay, that's all we do for now. We have a scene and we have reflections. Now how do we get a reflection catcher? Well, most of that work is done in the compositor. So let's switch over to the compositor. Let me bring this up so we can see what we have in our image editor render result. Switch off backdrop. I don't like to use backdrop. I don't know, so many people like it. So now if I go in here and just turn this to 50% and give it a quick render, we get this, and this is the image. Okay, so how do we isolate out these reflections here? Because that's what we really care about when we want to create a reflection catcher. Similar to the last video that I mentioned at the beginning, we have to get the reflection in one layer, and then our object in another layer, and then in here in the compositor we put it all on top of each other. So the easiest thing is to get just our object. And just like in the last video, we do that by activating the object CryptoMatte, rendering again, and we plug in a CryptoMatte node and hook up these sockets here that are necessary for the CryptoMatte to work. Now we also add a viewer node, maybe split this screen down here. Okay, split the screen. Maybe plug in the viewer node over here. So here we have the CryptoMatte. Add this to our mat, and here we have the object isolated. Okay, now how do we get those reflections? In the last video, I showed you that we can switch on the glossy indirect pass. Give it a render again. And then when we look at this glossy indirect pass over here, we get all the glossy reflections with more than one bounce. So up here, this would be glossy direct reflections. And you can see we have nothing here because that would be this pass. Everything that has more than one bounce, like we see the sphere in the ground plane, which means that these light rays that we're looking at here bounced off the ground plane and the sphere. So now we get this glossy indirect pass, and we have the reflection down here. Now in the last video, what I did was I used a converter set alpha node and just plugged in the glossy indirect into the image and the alpha. And when we look at this output, you can see that we sort of get the reflections here. But there is a problem with this method. Let's look at our original image again, or maybe the glossy indirect pass directly. So what does this do, this set alpha node? It makes all the dark areas transparent and all the light areas opaque. But of course we have dark areas or darker areas in the reflections here. And we want them to be dark because we're reflecting a sphere that might be dark in certain areas. And we don't want this part here to be transparent. We just want this outer part here to be transparent. Now we could do a little bit of a trick with a color mix, set that to dodge. Now let me look at this, set this to dodge, and then play with this here a little. And what that does is we're bringing up all the light that we have in the reflection here. So this is still black, but here we have a lighter area now. Now if we use this for our set alpha node, we get this, which is probably better because now we don't have so much transparency here in the darker areas of the reflections, but we still have transparency. We can still see that checkerboard texture through here. And we really don't want this most of the time. We want the reflection just like in this image here. We want it to look like this. So this method might be okay, but, or actually we could use our original image and set alpha with the dodged glossy indirect, and we get this. Well, like I said, this might be okay for whatever you want to do, but I kind of try to figure out how to get a better reflection catcher. For example, right here, where it's just a dark reflection, we actually get nothing, we get transparency. And if we were to put this onto, like, I don't know, a green background, like this, and you can see instead of a dark reflection here, we actually get green, we get transparency, but we want this dark reflection. And I spent quite some time in the material settings, and I tried to figure out how we could actually create a reflection catcher in the materials, and I could not find any way. So if you know of any solution that actually creates a reflection catcher where all of this is transparent, and also this here is like 50% transparent and fades or feathers out nicely, and all we really get is this reflection, then please let me know, link something in the comments. I really want to know how this is done. I couldn't figure it out. So my solution is to do all of this in the compositor. And also similar to the last video, we will do this by creating scenes. So what I want for this to work here is I want a mask that masks out just this reflection, where all of this is black and just this area here where we can see the reflection is white, and then we can use that as a mask to mask the image from our glossy indirect pass, and we don't have to do this set alpha on itself kind of trickery here. Okay, how do we get a mask for the reflection? First of all, I'm going to call this a scene all or complete, or I mean this is just the entire scene with all the lights and environment and everything. So I just call this all. And I'm going to create a new collection where I call this collection ground, or let's call it stage. And I put the plane into the stage, and then the sphere. I create a new collection, drag the sphere in here. Maybe this is for product visualization, so I call this product. And now I'm going to use a material trick to mask or to create that mask that I was talking about. And I do that by first of all coming down here to the material, and this blue material on the sphere is now assigned to this object data. And if I Shift D, I create a duplicate, but maybe that's not what I want. I want to do Alt D to just create a new instance with the same data. So first of all, on the sphere, I switch this to object and assign this material. Now this object here has this blue material, and it's using the sphere mesh data in the background. Now I can do Alt D, hit escape. Here I have sphere 1. I'm gonna call this reflection matte and move it to a new collection, which I also call reflection matte. Now these two spheres here are using the same object data, the same mesh data. So I can still go in and edit the mesh, but they can be assigned different materials. So this reflection matte, I'm going to create a new material. Okay, so if I hide this one, this sphere should be set to object and blue. And if I look at this one, this sphere has a different material now. And this material I'm going to turn into something that gives me a mask for the reflection. So I'm going to do a mix between an emission and a transparent. Mix this like this. Now I add an input light path. Okay, and then I use the isGlossyRay to mix between transparent and emission. So every time we look at this sphere through a reflection, we get a white emission. Turn this up to 5. So now down here, we have our reflection. Okay, now we need to create a new scene where we just render the reflection. So I go up here, click this little icon, I click linked copy, call this reflection matte, and in reflection matte I right click on the product and exclude it. So now we have no sphere, no blue sphere, we just have this reflection matte visible in this scene, and in our all scene we exclude the reflection matte. So here we have the blue sphere, and here we have the reflection matte. Now in order for this to work and we can take out just this white area in the compositor, we have to turn everything else dark. And this is where we switch our world setting, which has the HDRI light on it, over to a new world setting. So I just hit this little number 2. So now we have world 001, or I just call it world reflection matte. And in this world reflection matte, we switch off the visibility of the environment light. And also I'm going to move this light into its own collection, I think. Move to new collection. I call it lights. And in our reflection matte scene, I'm going to exclude the lights also. So now we have white where we have a reflection and black where we don't have reflection. And in this scene over here, now we're missing the light in this scene. So let me just come back here and copy this over to this scene. So we have the nice reflections here again. Okay, right in this scene, this is good. We want the lights. And in the reflection matte, we exclude the light. Okay, so now we have 2 scenes. And when I first, let me save this out quick and then go over to the compositor, hit F12. Now we're rendering 2 scenes. So in our all scene, we can duplicate the render layer, come in here, switch this over to reflection matte. Now we have to render again quick because we didn't have that node in the compositor before. Okay, so we're rendering the 2 images. First image is our complete scene, like this one. And the other image is this one where we can now use this. Actually, in this reflection matte scene over here, we can turn off this indirect and this crypto matte. That's not really needed. All we need is this image. Now we take a matte luminance key, which is a filter that takes the luminance, the brightness of each pixel, and we can create a matte out of that. So what we really want is something like this. Oh, I also forgot to set the environment to transparent. So film transparency, and also in the reflection matte transparency, go back to the all, render again. Okay, so this is our image now. Here, this is transparent. We can use the luminance key if we need to filter out any other, like not as bright areas. So all we have left is this white area where the reflection is. And this is a perfect mask now. Instead of this, we're going to use the glossy indirect. and use this as our mask. And here we go. This is the reflection, and you can see on the side here, we're getting transparent. Of course, this is now very noisy because I'm only rendering it with 128 samples. Of course, for a final render, this would look much nicer. But this is how we mask out just this area of reflection. Now, if we put this on top of a green background, you can see this is what we get. And we notice something here. We get this dark border here. When we look at our original image, there is no dark edge here. It just goes from nice reflection, it goes feathers nicely into the actual plane here, the reflection in the plane. So over here we can see we have this dark area. So how do we get rid of that? Well, we can do that on our mask. So if this is our mask, we can take a filter, erode, that's what it's called. So now let's look at the output here. We can do a feather, set this to something like a sphere, and then use this distance, and I slide it to the left, and you can see I'm bringing it inwards. So I'm gonna create more of a feathering, more of a transparent feather between our reflection and whatever we're putting the reflection on. So if we look at this on the green again, with this feathering, we can really take away this dark sort of fringe around here. So this helps quite a bit. But again, we introduced a new problem, because when we look at this here, we can see that down here, we get sort of a wide area of feathering between the reflection and whatever the background is. And up here, it's sharper, right? But when we bring this in with our dilate erode node, we're also bringing it in up here, not just down here. So how do we fix that? Well, for an animation, this might be a little bit tricky, but for a still image, we can do something like a box mask. Let's look at that. Make it wide and full height. Then bring it up like this. So let's see, we want it to be like right down here. Okay, so like this. Then we put in a filter, blur, fast Gaussian, relative, and blur it like 10%. So we have this gradient here. Okay, now we take a color mix. We take our mask that we pulled in with the erode node and use our gradient as a mix factor like this. And now I'm also going to duplicate this and create another erode node where I'm not taking the distance down so much, just like a little bit. I don't know, 5 or -5 to take it inwards. And I'm going to use this on top and this on the bottom. And now I'm not sure if this is working correctly. Let's see, this is the mask. This is the one that's not pulled in so far, and this is the blurrier one. And if we're mixing this together, I think this is actually correct. And when we use this for the alpha now, and layer it on top of something green. Is it the other way around now? Of course it is. Okay, so let's just switch these out. Right, so now here we have the sharper edge for the top where we can take away this dark border. And down here we have this erode node where we can really take away a lot here. So we have this nice gradient between the green and the reflection. Okay, so now this is our reflection. Let's look at the original image. This was the original rendering, and this is the reflection on green, and I think it looks pretty nice. Now we can take our Cryptomatte, where we just isolate the object here, and put that on top with another set alpha node. So we put this on top of this. So now we have the product and its reflection on a new background. And of course, we can set this background to be completely transparent. And here you have a reflection catcher. Now you can render this out and place it on top of any other background image. Now, just for fun, let's come back here and create a new background image. So in our all, we have this square ground plane that creates the reflection for us. I'm going to create a new scene by clicking here, link copy. I'm gonna call this one new stage. And in new stage, I'm going to use the other world settings, so we don't have any environment reflections here. And I'm going to also exclude this stage because I'm going to create a new one. I'm also gonna exclude the product. And I will create a new stage, maybe a circle, fill it with an n-gon, like this. Scale it up a little. So this is our new stage. Maybe I'll leave it a little smaller so I can show you another little trick in the compositor. Okay, this needs a new material, white, I don't know, maybe turn this to a more of a pinkish color, like so. We also have the light in here, and we might add, I don't know, maybe let's add another light, point light, put it over here, just to have a more interesting new ground plane. Okay, make this bluish light like this. So now we have 3 different scenes. We go back to the all scene, go to the compositor, duplicate our render layer node once more, set it to new stage, and again in here in the new stage we don't need this or that really. Okay, now save it and give it a render. Okay, so now we have all 3 render layers here. And instead of putting this on a green background, we're going to use this one now. Put that on there, and you can see what our problem is here. Let me just move all of this down a little. So this is our new background here, but of course the reflection needs to be cut off here, and this is easily done Down here, we simply duplicate this mix node, set it to multiply, and take this alpha output and multiply it on top of this. So what's happening here? This is our mask for the reflection. And by multiplying this alpha output on top of this, we're taking out this part down here where there is no plane, no circle here. Right, so multiplied, it looks like this. Now this is our mask for the reflection. And by putting this on top of this ground plane, we now have our product with its reflection, including the dark parts of the reflection, on a new background. Okay, and that is it, guys. That's the reflection catcher. Let me just make this big so you can see what's happening. Maybe move this over a little so that it's a little clearer. Right. Here we have the original image. And we use the Cryptomatte to cut out just the product itself. We also use the glossy indirect pass from our original rendering and use our special material rendering here, where we just have a matte, like a mask for the reflection area. And we do a little bit of post-processing on that by feathering it and moving it inwards with the erode node. Then also putting a gradient blur texture on top of this. And then we simply alpha over everything on top of a new background. This could be basically anything. I just rendered something. And what we get is, I think, a pretty nice looking reflection on a different background. Now, maybe one final touch, because we actually have a different color ground plane now. The other one was more orangey red and this one is more pink. We might want to go in here and change the reflection right in here. Color, maybe another mix node like this. Set this to dodge, bring this in, and then play with the colors here. And simply change the colors of the reflection to make them a little bit more pinkish. Like so. So now the reflections here, the colors in the reflection here, match this pink a little better. One thing that I want to mention here is, when I go back to this screen here, when I posted the other video about the reflections, somebody asked, how do you get rid of the environment reflections in the ground plane, but keep the environment reflections in the product? So this light here, this orange light, comes from the environment light. Let me just set the strength here to 0. So this is what it looks like without the environment light. And all of this red, orange, brownish color here in the ground plane comes from the environment light. How do you get rid of this and keep only the real lights in your scene in the ground plane? Well, I think maybe you noticed that we've already kind of done that by simply creating a different world setting. You can have more than one world in your blend file. And on the scenes, you define which world setting should be used for this scene. So in the reflection matte scene, we're using this world setting where we don't have any glossy reflections of our environment light. We could also simply remove it here, but switching this checkbox on and off is easier. And in this scene, we're using this world setting where we do see the glossy reflections. So this is how you get rid of the environment reflections in certain objects and keep them in others. Because by rendering out different scenes and compositing them back together, of course you can have just like what we have here. In this scene, we don't have any environment textures reflecting, we just have the two lights. But in this scene where we look at the product and the reflection of the product, we have the nice reflections of the environment texture. Alright, that's it guys. This is how I create a reflection catcher in Blender Cycles. I hope you liked the video. I hope you learned something. If you did, please hit the like button, write a comment, ask your questions. I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, bye bye.